Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. The Velvet Claws Bar sat on the 25th floor of a glass tower in the heart of Manhattan, a place where young lawyers came to forget their stress briefly, yet still carried the meticulous composure of their profession down to the last button. Amber lights reflected off marble tables, rippling across glasses filled with golden liquor. Lazy jazz drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of whiskey, expensive perfume, and the forced laughter of attorneys fresh out of another long day in court. Isabel Blake sat at the bar, her dark brown eyes gleaming with exhaustion and pride. Her caramel brown hair was tied low, a few strands loose around her cheeks, softening her face amid the world of men in gray suits and calculated smiles. She wore a fitted black dress, formal enough for the firm, yet alluring enough to make people think, she's the kind of woman who has everything under control, at least until tonight. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend at the firm. Isabel, don't come to the bar. Charles is here. With that partner he keeps calling just a client. Her heart clenched. Isabel looked up, scanning the bright, laughter-filled room, and then she saw them. Charles sitting in the corner, his hand casually resting on the back of a chair, close enough for his fingers to graze the woman's shoulder. The blonde laughed softly, her hair shimmering under the light. Isabel froze. It felt like the air had been sucked from her lungs. 3 years together, law school, internships, late nights building their careers side by side. And this was her reward? Charles looked up, catching her gaze. A flicker of guilt crossed his face before he stood, straightening his suit, confidence radiating from every line of his body. Isabel, what are you doing here? She fought to keep her voice steady, though her knees trembled. I could ask you the same. The woman beside him adjusted her dress awkwardly, but Charles merely sighed, brushing back his perfectly styled hair. Don't make a scene. It's nothing. His tone was cold, the kind he used when dismissing demanding clients. She laughed. A dry, brittle sound that sliced through the hum of the bar, drawing curious glances. You cheat on me where all our colleagues hang out and tell me not to make a scene? Charles shrugged, arrogance flickering in his eyes. Isabel, come on. We both knew this was coming. You're safe, dependable, but you're not exciting anymore. I need someone with a bit more challenge. A knife to the heart. Clean, sharp, deliberate. Not just betrayal, humiliation. Isabel stood tall, eyes blazing. In her mind, 1,000 revenge scenarios flashed by. She could throw her drink in his face, slap him, scream. But she didn't. She was a lawyer, and lawyers strike back with precision. Her gaze swept across the room and stopped. At the far end of the bar sat a stranger. His posture was relaxed, almost regal, as if the chaos of the world couldn't touch him. He wore a black suit, a dark silk tie, and the silver edge of an exquisite watch glinting at his wrist. His face was composed, features sharp as if carved from stone. Dark hair fell neatly across his forehead, but it was his eyes, steel gray, calm and unreadable, that held her. A man who didn't need to speak to command a room. Isabel didn't think. She acted. Her heels struck the wooden floor with measured confidence. The jazz, the chatter, everything blurred into background noise. She reached him, said nothing, grabbed his lapel, and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't planned. It was fire. Reckless, furious, desperate for release. The man froze for a heartbeat, clearly not expecting to be ambushed by a stranger. But then, instead of pulling away, his hand slid to her waist, steady and assured, returning the kiss with slow, deliberate control, the kind that could burn through ice. The air around them cracked. Someone whistled, someone else clapped. Isabel pulled back, breath unsteady, lips trembling. The stranger, Luca Harrington, looked at her with mild amusement, a faint smirk curving his lips. His voice was low, velvety, dangerous. A bold move, counselor. Interesting legal strategy. Across the room, Charles stood frozen, mouth open like a man who just lost the most significant case of his life. Isabel fixed her hair, gave him a look colder than the marble under her heels. "You're right, Charles. I do need a challenge." Then she turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing like the rhythm of victory drums. When the door closed behind her, laughter and music faded, leaving only the wild pounding of her heart. Out on the New York street, the night wind tangled in her hair. She tilted her head back, breathing deep. She had just kissed a stranger in front of her ex, and probably half the Manhattan legal scene. "I've officially lost my mind," she whispered, her lips still tingling with the taste of whiskey and an unfamiliar trace of mint. She swore she would never speak of it again. Never. But somewhere deep in her mind, that half smile, his half smile, lingered, like a verdict not yet closed. Monday mornings in Manhattan always began with the sharp rhythm of heels and the faint scent of burnt coffee drifting through glass hallways. The Harrington and Myers LLP building, tall, cold, and solemn like a cathedral of law, gleamed under the early sunlight. Streams of lawyers in gray suits flowed toward the elevators, each carrying a folder and a different version of exhaustion. Isabel Blake stood before the mirror in the 24th floor restroom, suppressing a sigh. There were still faint shadows beneath her eyes, reminders of that insane Friday night at the bar. Every time she thought about it, she wanted to slam her head against a keyboard. A kiss, with a stranger, in front of her ex-colleagues. And worse, someone might have filmed it. She straightened her blazer, buttoned it, and adjusted the collar of her white shirt. "I'm a lawyer, not the protagonist of a cheap romance movie," she muttered to herself, then stepped into the hallway, buzzing with chatter. The atmosphere felt different today. Louder, charged. Groups of associates clustered near the coffee machine, eyes bright with gossip. "I heard the firm just merged with the Harrington Legal Group. The new managing partners are from London. They say he once made an entire multinational board plead guilty with just a 2-page memo." Isabel raised an eyebrow, pouring coffee, trying to seem indifferent. But her heart skipped a beat at the name Harrington. "No way," she whispered, chuckling under her breath. "New York has at least 10 people with that surname." As for him, the man she'd kissed, he was probably miles away, in another city, another world. But fate, apparently, had a dark sense of humor. By 10 a.m., every employee was summoned to the top-floor conference room, a space reserved only for landmark cases or power shifts. Isabel took a seat in the middle row. The room hummed with anticipation, whispers blending with the distant shimmer of the Hudson River outside the glass wall. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hall, steady, measured. Every head turned. The door opened. A man walked in, tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit without a single wrinkle. Light caught the smooth line of his dark hair and the steel gray glint of his eyes. The kind of gaze that belonged to someone accustomed to making decisions and never backing down. Isabel felt her blood freeze. Her pulse faltered. That man, Luca Harrington. He stepped to the podium. "Good morning." His voice was low, calm, slicing through the room like a blade. "I'll be overseeing all litigation divisions starting today. I expect professionalism, precision, and above all, composure." Isabel almost dropped her pen. He wasn't just a stranger from the bar. He was her new boss. The room fell silent. Colleagues took notes, nodded politely, while she wanted nothing more than to vanish into her chair. In her mind, fragments of that night replayed like a film reel. The jazz, the scent of mint, the teasing half smile, the pressure of his hand on her waist. "No, it can't be," Isabel whispered, her mouth dry. He scanned the room, his gaze sweeping from one face to another, until it stopped. On her, a beat of silence stretched, suspended in the air. His eyes stayed fixed, unreadable, but his lips curved ever so slightly, half amusement, half intrigue, as if she were a case file that had just become very interesting. Isabel tried to look away, but the harder she tried, the more she felt the weight of his gaze following her every slight movement. Then just when she thought the meeting was over, his voice cut through again. "Before we adjourn," heads turned. "Miss Blake," he said evenly, his tone smooth, deliberate, impossible to misinterpret. I trust you'll be less impulsive in the office. A moment of a stunned silence, the scrape of a chair, the faint clatter of a dropped pen, a few raised eyebrows. Isabel froze. Heat flushed to her face and her ears buzzed. Did he just? Less impulsive? Oh, God. He was referencing the kiss. She forced a tight smile, swallowing what might have been a groan of despair. Colleagues exchanged curious glances. One secretary leaned over and whispered, Impulsive? What's going on between you two? Isabel wanted to bang her head against the table. And Luca? He tilted his head slightly, expression calm, unbothered, but his eyes glimmered with a quiet, taunting amusement. That subtle smirk, the kind only men who knew precisely how much power they held, sent her nerves spinning. When the meeting finally ended, the staff poured out into the hallway like prisoners released from prison. Isabel remained seated, hands gripping her folder, heart pounding out of rhythm. She whispered to herself, I need to quit. Now. Today. But then came the voice behind her. Calm, deep, inescapable. Miss Blake. My office. 5 minutes. She turned. Those cold, commanding eyes met hers. Powerful, sharp, and dangerously unreadable. On the table, her coffee had gone cold. On her lips, the taste of humiliation lingered, mixed with something dangerously close to curiosity. Because deep down, Isabel knew. This Monday morning, the real trial had just begun. 3 days after the Monday morning trial, the office of Harrington and Myers was buzzing like a broken beehive. Rumors traveled faster than any verdict ever filed in court. She kissed the boss and got promoted. Guess who Harrington chose as his personal assistant? Isabel Blake, fastest career climb in legal history. Those whispers followed Isabel down every hallway, from the coffee machine to the copy room. Each step felt like walking through an unofficial jury, and yet Luca Harrington seemed to be enjoying the chaos. That morning, she was summoned to his office, the 30th floor, executive-only territory. Glass walls, sunlight spilling over polished oak floors, the faint scent of leather, and that familiar hint of mint that almost stole her breath. Luca stood with his back turned, gazing out the window. The city stretched beneath him, towers of steel gray, cars small as chess pieces. Morning light traced along his suit shoulders, outlining his dark hair, making him look carved from metal and light. Miss Blake, he said, voice deep and steady, I've reviewed the Stamford case files. Isabel tightened her grip on the folder. Yes, sir. I want you to take on a new role, legal liaison. Her brows knitted as she looked up, thinking she'd misheard. You mean working directly with you on high-profile cases? Exactly. She nearly dropped her pen. I don't think that's a good idea. He turned, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I think it's an excellent idea. You've got skill and experience handling me. His eyes lowered slightly, a look half challenge, half reminder of that night at the bar. Isabel flushed, rushing to change the subject. I'm afraid people in the office might misunderstand. They already do, he interrupted calmly. So why not give them a reason too? She froze. Did he really say that? Sunlight pooled through the glass as Luca stood there, smiling faintly, as if this were just another move in a game of chess he'd already mastered. From that day on, Isabel Blake's name appeared on every significant project email. Her desk was moved right outside his office, separated only by a pane of glass. Every time that door opened, she'd hear his voice, low, precise, occasionally teasing enough to make her heart clench and her lips want to laugh. One afternoon, as she was flipping through case files, Luca stepped out, coffee in hand, eyes glinting mischievously. Miss Blake, I've never seen anyone file an appeal as fast as you. I like to make deadlines, sir. Faster than you ran out of that bar that night. Isabel almost choked on her drink. Don't remind me. He chuckled softly, leaning closer, his breath a mix of mint and coffee. I won't, so long as you don't make me remember. She turned away, hiding the smile threatening to bloom, though her mind was in chaos. Part of her wanted to avoid him. Another part couldn't stay away from his dangerous wordplay. The whole office began watching them. Every time he called her in for a meeting, stares flashed like camera lights. One young associate whispered with a grin, "Congrats, Isabel. Promotion by lips?" Her reply was cool and sharp as glass. "No, by brains. The lips are only for arguments." That answer spread like wildfire, and from that day on, no one dared whisper in front of her again. But Luca heard about it, and he smiled. The smile of a man who just witnessed a lawyer capable of defending herself. Friday evening, the office emptied, hallway lights dimmed, leaving only the soft amber glow from his room. Isabel was packing up when his voice broke the quiet. "What do you think about the new contract draft? The confidentiality clause needs revision. You should let me adjust." "You should, huh?" he interrupted, stepping closer, voice lower. "I thought after that fateful kiss, we could drop the formalities." She froze, embarrassed and furious all at once. "That was an accident, not fate." "I'm still not convinced." They were close enough for her to feel his warmth. Light from the window brushed across his face in a soft golden hue. She swallowed hard, forcing her tone steady. "If you don't need anything else, I'll be leaving." "Isabel," he said her name quietly, for the first time without the cold distance. "I didn't choose you because of rumors. I chose you because I trust you. Don't forget that." The door closed softly behind her, leaving only the whisper of wind through the blinds, and a half smile that made her heartbeat trip. That night, back in her small apartment, Isabel stood before the mirror, fingertips brushing her lips. She was no longer the woman who bowed to hurt. She was caught in a strange battle, where reason fought desire, and her opponent was the one man who'd ever made her lose control. A sweet verdict, and she still didn't know whether she was the lawyer or the one being sentenced. Monday morning, the Harrington and Myers office looked like a battlefield. Every desk was buried under stacks of documents, coffee cups, and tense faces. Amid the chaos, Isabel Blake walked into the main conference room with her laptop, looking composed, though her eyes betrayed a bad feeling. Across the large screen glowed the title, "International Contract Restructuring. Harrington Lead Case," her first major case with Luca. And according to office rumors, it is one of the hottest deals of the year. The International Partner Corporation was renegotiating a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A single misused word in the legal phrasing could cost them everything. Then Luca entered. Black suit, silver tie, eyes sharp and cold as a blade. Everyone immediately stood. "Sit," he said. "We have 72 hours to finalize the restructuring agreement." A wave of disbelief rippled through the room. Isabel froze, accidentally hitting the enter key too hard on her keyboard. 72 hours? She repeated, incredulous. "Do you think we're robots?" Luca didn't even blink. "I prefer the term highly efficient." The room went dead silent. One associate coughed, then quietly slipped away. Isabel crossed her arms. "I call that contractual forced labor." He glanced at her, one corner of his mouth lifting. "Then file a lawsuit, Counselor Blake." The tension cracked. Half the office tried not to laugh, the other half held their breath. Isabel just gave a dry smile, plugged in her headphones, and opened her laptop. "Fine. Watch me win this one. I'm counting on it." That night, the 30th floor glowed white under the office lights. Outside, Manhattan shimmered, rain streaking the glass walls. Inside, only two people remained. Luca sat at the head desk, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, his hands moving across the keyboard with surgical precision. Isabel swore even his typing sounded like evidence being built. Light spilled across his face, a rugged jawline, focused eyes, veins faintly visible on his wrist as he wrote notes by hand. Across from him, Isabel sat hunched over a wall of files. Her brown hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling to her shoulders. The silver frame of her glasses caught the monitor's glow. Her fingers flew over the keys, the silver ring on her hand tapping a steady tick-tick-tick, blending with the hum of the AC and the bitter scent of coffee. "Clause 42's a problem," she said, eyes still on the screen. "If we keep it as is, the partner company could pull out without paying penalties." Luca looked up, gaze razor sharp. "Solution?" "Add a line about contingent liability. and a comma in section 3. A comma? Sometimes a comma saves an entire company, Mr. Harrington. He paused for a beat, then nodded. Noted. Electric tension hummed between them. She shot him a teasing look. Planning to write noted and present it as your idea to the board later? If I did, would you sue me, Miss Blake? No, I'd record it. He chuckled for the first time that night. That rare smile threw her off balance. Isabel looked down, typing faster, pretending not to notice the warmth rising to her cheeks. Near midnight, the mountain of files had thinned. The yellow desk lamp cast soft light over 2 tired figures. Isabel stretched her neck, muttering, "Do you ever sleep?" Without looking up, Luca replied, "Sleep is for the defeated. You should tell that to your therapist." "I would if you hadn't stolen my appointment slot." She blinked, caught off guard. Their eyes met. A quiet second between keystrokes and rain. Her voice softened. "I thought you didn't believe in people. Or feelings." "I don't. Then why trust me?" Luca stopped typing and met her gaze directly. "I don't trust you. I want to see where your limits are." His words hit her like a challenge she hadn't expected. But in his eyes, for the first time, there was something else. A faint crack in the ice. She tilted her head, tone calm but daring. "Careful, Harrington. I'm very good at breaking limits." He smiled, slow, dangerous, and sweet. "I know. That's why you're still here." 2 in the morning. The lights were still on and the war of documents raged on. Isabel leaned on her hand, staring at him. How can someone be so insufferable and so captivating at the same time? And Luca, through the glass reflection, watched her too. Her eyes lit up when she argued, her voice sharp but clear. He wondered when, among all the trials he'd conquered, one woman had made him feel like he needed to fight harder. Finally, Isabel stood, gathering the last set of papers. "Done. The deadline was in 72 hours, and we finished in 16. I'm not sure if I should be proud or report this as a labor crime." "Both," he said, rising slowly with that faint, knowing smile. "But if it's a crime, I'll serve the sentence with you." She laughed, stepping out of the room, heart pounding a little too fast. Behind her, Luca's voice followed, low, quiet, deliberate. "Miss Blake, impressive performance." And in the sleepless city of Manhattan, under the steady hum of rain, 2 lawyers had just begun their first war, where the opponent was also the one who made their hearts race. Thursday morning, the office of Harrington and Myers was livelier than usual. Everyone gathered in the lobby, waiting for the elevator and chatting excitedly about the lawsuit the firm had just won. Isabel walked in, arms full of files, her face bright but her eyes still shadowed with fatigue from too many late nights. She had barely set her bag down at the reception desk when a voice she knew all too well spoke behind her. Cold, arrogant, as if it had never once broken her heart. "Well, look at you, Isabel Blake. I thought you'd be miserable after I left you, but it seems you've climbed up fast." She turned. Charles Davies. Navy suit, deep red tie, the same handsome face, but his eyes had hardened into something sharp and metallic, brimming with bitterness. Isabel's brow furrowed. She turned to leave, but he stepped closer, voice raised just enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I heard you've got quite the unique way of getting promoted. One kiss, and now you're the CEO's personal assistant." The air froze instantly. Fingers paused above phone screens. Eyes darted like blades. Even the coffee machine in the corner seemed to hiss too loudly. Isabel straightened, clutching her files until her knuckles whitened. Her voice was calm, steady. "Are you drunk, Charles, or just humiliating yourself on purpose?" He laughed, the sound dripping with mockery and provocation. "Oh, I'm just telling the truth. Everyone here knows. You kissed your boss in a bar, and magically, a few weeks later, you were promoted. Or should I call that a little promotion pillow talk?" A few murmurs rippled through the room. Isabel felt her blood surge, but she didn't move. She had promised herself, never again would she let him see her hurt. And then, another voice cut through the tension, deep and steady, like a judge's gavel. "Watch your words, Mr. Davies." Every head turned. From the main hallway, Luca Harrington walked forward. each slow, deliberate step radiating authority. Black suit, silver gray tie, the light catching on his sharp features and cool steel gray eyes. Charles swallowed hard but tried to hold his ground. I was just expressing an opinion. No, Luca interrupted, voice low but commanding enough to silence the entire floor. You just insulted a colleague. One more word, and I'll have grounds for a defamation case. Believe me, I know how to close one of those within 24 hours. The lobby went dead quiet. Luca's gaze stayed locked on Charles, cold, cutting, with a pressure so palpable it seemed to compress the air itself. Charles opened his mouth, then shut it again. His face flushed red. Without another word, he turned and stormed off. So fast, he clipped the reception desk on his way out. A few quiet laughs broke the silence. Luca lingered for a moment, then turned to Isabel. Are you all right, Miss Blake? She looked up at him, startled. In the reflection of the glass ceiling, he seemed like a wall, cold, proud, yet radiating an unfamiliar warmth. I'm fine, she said softly, her voice trembling just a little. You didn't have to. I did, he cut her off gently, eyes steady on hers. Because no one gets to insult my people. The words struck like lightning in broad daylight. A few employees gasped quietly. Isabel stood frozen, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Luca gave a slight nod and turned away, leaving behind a trace of mint and silence that wrapped around her like a spell. Isabel watched him go, her lips trembling. She had never met anyone so terrifying, and yet so easy to believe in. As the elevator doors closed behind him, she stood motionless amid the stairs around her. And in that moment, Isabel realized, sometimes it only takes one person standing in front of you to make the whole world feel safe. May in Rome, the sky so blue it looked ready to melt. Sunlight pouring like liquid honey over terracotta rooftops. The whole city smelled of roasted coffee and echoed with the endless roll of wheels on cobblestone streets. Isabel stepped out of the airport beside Luca, dressed in a cream-colored suit, hair pinned neatly, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. She tried to appear calm, though her heart thudded like a warning drum. A business trip to Rome. 2 lawyers representing their firm at the European Trade Conference. It sounded purely professional. Yet for them, it was a test of restraint far more dangerous than any courtroom battle. By day, they were perfection. The grand conference hall by the Tiber shimmered with natural light. Luca stood at the podium, speaking with sharp, commanding precision. Each sentence cut clean like a surgeon's scalpel. Isabel sat beside him, translating, taking notes, countering questions. The seamless extension of his argument. Observers watched the quiet rhythm between them, the way his gaze would shift toward her and how she answered with a single nod. No words needed, yet everything understood. Your associate is impressive, one Italian lawyer remarked. She finishes your sentences. She corrects them, Luca replied, half serious, half playful, earning a ripple of laughter from the room. Isabel only pressed her lips together, pretending not to care. But deep down, a slight warmth flickered in her chest. He rarely praised anyone in public. By night, Rome changed its skin. The streets glowed gold under lantern light. The air carried the scent of pizza, gelato, and red wine drifting through narrow alleys. They left the conference dinner early, escaping the stiff conversations about trade clauses and arbitration. Luca had loosened his tie and undone his top button. Isabel had ditched her blazer, heels in hand, walking barefoot over ancient stones. This is the first time I've seen you look human, she teased, glancing sideways at him. I can't tell if I should be flattered or offended. Both. She grinned, handing him a pistachio gelato. Eat up, Mr. Ice-Cold CEO of law. He looked at the cone, then at her. I don't eat sweets. That's fine. More for me. She took a lick, wincing at the chill. He let out a low, genuine laugh, the kind that made her almost forget he was the nightmare boss of her office life. They wandered toward Piazza Navona, where a street violinist was playing La Vie en Rose. Isabel turned slowly, her skirt flaring as the night breeze swirled around her. Luca stood still, watching. The golden light softened his steel gray eyes. "You know something, Blake," he said quietly. "You really are different. I hope in a good way, in a way that keeps me awake." The air stilled between them. Then she laughed, half teasing, half trying to hide her quickened pulse. "Relax, I don't debate after dark." "Shame." I was hoping to start an argument. They walked side by side until the square emptied, the music fading into the wind, their footsteps echoing against the centuries-old stone. Later that night, their hotel was perched on Aventine Hill, overlooking the shimmering Tiber. Isabel stood on the balcony in a robe, the night breeze threading through her hair, carrying the scent of lavender. Below, Rome slept beneath distant church bells. Luca appeared behind her, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one, his voice low but softer than usual. Why me that night? She didn't need to ask which night he meant. The night at the bar. Isabel smiled faintly, swirling the amber liquid. "Because you looked unbreakable." "Unbreakable?" His voice dropped, husky. "I was breaking. And you looked like someone nothing could ever hurt." A silence fell heavy, unguarded. Only the wind spoke. Luca set his glass down on the railing, stepped closer, close enough for the air between them to spark. "And now?" he murmured. She lifted her gaze. Brown met gray, 2 skies colliding. He leaned in, his breath brushing her lips, warm and uncertain, intoxicating. A heartbeat passed. Then he stopped. Luca inhaled sharply, eyes conflicted, hand tightening on the railing. "If I kiss you now, Isabel, I won't be able to stop." She swallowed, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "Maybe this time I wouldn't run." He closed his eyes and then stepped back, restraint and longing warring in his expression. "That's exactly why I shouldn't." Isabel stood frozen as the glass door clicked shut behind him. The night wind swept through her hair, cool and cruel, carrying the scent of wine and what might have been. In the city of love, they both understood. The most dangerous thing wasn't desire, it was the feeling that had started to feel real. That night, the office of Harrington and Myers was almost empty. Light from the glass panels spilled across the marble floor, stretching into long, lonely streaks. Only one room still glowed. Luca's office, a quiet island on the 30th floor, while the city below shimmered under amber streetlights. Isabel had only meant to drop off a few case files, but when she gently pushed the door open, she froze. Luca sat alone in the dimness, the soft glow of a desk lamp casting a gentle light across his face. In front of him lay an old photograph and a half-finished glass of whiskey. He hadn't noticed her enter. His voice, low and hoarse, broke the silence, more like he was speaking to himself than anyone else. "Love is just a beautiful clause people forget to read." The words made her chest tighten. Isabel stayed still, hidden in the shadows. The light from the blinds swept across his face, every sharp line of control intact, except for his eyes. They were shattered. On the desk beside the photograph lay an old newspaper. The image showed a middle-aged man, Jonathan Harrington, the legendary attorney and founder of the firm, Luca's father. And suddenly she understood. The fragments she had collected, his cold precision, his obsession with control, the way he said, "I trust clauses more than people," all began to form a whole picture. The next morning, while sorting through the firm's internal archives, Isabel accidentally opened a company commemorative file, Founders and Families. Inside, an old article paid tribute to the late Mrs. Evelyn Harrington, the kind soul of the firm. A small line beneath it made her breath catch. Mrs. Evelyn Harrington passed away after a long battle with depression. She turned the page. A photo of the woman appeared, gentle eyes, a delicate smile. The same warmth she had seen in Luca's expression on his softest days. Below that, another photograph. Jonathan shaking hands with his young female assistant at an award ceremony. His hand rested on the woman's back. Intimate, careless, brazen. Isabel closed the file. She didn't need to read more. She already knew. That evening, Luca was there again. Same dim light, same quiet. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie loosened, and one hand turned the photo frame of his mother. The air smelled faintly of oak and whiskey. She spoke softly. "She was your mother?" He looked up, startled for a moment, then his eyes softened. "Yes." She used to believe love could fix everything. A hollow chuckle escaped him, brittle like glass cracking. My father betrayed her for years, openly, coldly. She still cooked for him, still waited up every night, still told me, forgiveness is strength. And then she started to fade, piece by piece. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. I was 12 when I first heard her cry. 13 was when she stopped crying. 14 when I sat beside her bed that final morning. My father never came. Isabel's throat tightened. She had never heard him speak so much, or sound so unguarded. Since that day, he continued, his gaze drifting to the city lights, I learned that love is the worst contract humans ever sign. Its clauses are vague, its duration is uncertain, and there's no protection when it collapses. So I chose something else. Law, logic, and control. The reflection of the city flickered over his face, cold, but his shoulders had lowered, as if bearing the weight of years he'd never shared. Isabel stepped closer and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. No words, no comfort, just a quiet touch, saying what words could not. You're not alone in this room anymore. Luca looked up. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, a light flickered between them. He didn't smile. He nodded and turned back to the photograph. Thank you, he murmured, almost to himself. And in that fragile instant, Isabel understood. Beneath the ice and iron logic, Luca Harrington was not a man incapable of feeling. He was still that 12-year-old boy, sitting in a silent house, watching his mother fade away under the weight of unreturned love. She said nothing, but her heart rendered its own verdict. It wasn't love that had broken him. It was the fear of loving again, the lifelong sentence written by his childhood. That evening, the 30th floor of Harrington and Myers glowed like a private celebration. The international case everyone thought would drag on for months had been closed in just 1 week, by Luca and Isabel. Not only did they win, but Legal World Review called it a historic rebuttal. Isabel stepped into his office, a stack of final documents in her arms. The room was softly lit, filled with the familiar scent of oak and mint, but tonight it felt different, warmer, lighter, like the breath that follows a storm. On his desk sat a chilled bottle of champagne, droplets sliding down the glass like tiny sparks under the light. We won, she said, her smile a mix of pride and exhaustion. No, Luca corrected, his gaze locked on hers. You won. I just watched. Isabel laughed, shaking her head. A compliment from Harrington. I should record this. You should, he replied, pouring the champagne, since it's rarer than snow in Rome. He handed her a glass. The bubbles rose and burst softly, filling the air with the scent of apples and vanilla. Their glasses met with a delicate ting that echoed across the quiet room. So, she asked, tilting her head, half teasing, half shy, Mr. Harrington, how do you usually celebrate victory? Luca paused, eyes shifting from his glass to her. Silence stretched. Then his voice dropped, low and deliberate. Like this. And before Isabel could ask what this meant, he stepped forward, set his glass down, and kissed her. It wasn't like that night at the bar. No laughter, no audience, no bitter taste of revenge. This kiss was slow, gentle, honest, so much so that she nearly forgot to breathe. He tasted faintly of champagne, warm, sweet, intoxicating. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the curve of her face as if afraid she might shatter. She closed her eyes, heart pounding, the sensation both strange and achingly familiar, like returning to a moment she'd once fled, but this time choosing to stay. He drew back slightly, close enough that his breath still mingled with hers. The city lights framed his gray eyes, now softer, stripped of power and pride. No games this time, he whispered. No contracts. No control. Just this. Isabel didn't answer. She smiled, faint, certain, and kissed him again. That second kiss felt like music. Two people who had clashed, broken, and fought to stay rational, finally surrendering to something real. It wasn't fierce. It was steady, like a quiet promise. I'm here, and I'm not running anymore. They parted, breaths entwined, the silence stretching in tender disbelief. Outside, Manhattan shimmered. Cars streamed below like veins of light. Inside, only soft jazz hummed from a Bluetooth speaker he'd forgotten to turn off. "You always make things dangerous," she murmured, still breathless. "And you," he said, smiling faintly, "make danger worth it." She looked at him, part scolding, part fondness in her eyes. "I won this case, remember? You were just a witness." "True," he nodded, "but I think I just signed another kind of deal, one with no exit clause." Isabel laughed softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You always need control, even over your feelings, don't you, Harrington?" "No," he said quietly. "With you, I just need trust." She lifted her gaze, and in that look, steady, unguarded, the man who once believed love was the riskiest clause of all finally began to learn what it meant to sign something with no paper, no seal, only his heart. The night drifted on, the champagne glasses emptied, the lights dimmed, a soft wind pressed against the windows, carrying the scent of rain. Isabel stepped out onto the balcony, the city glittering beneath her. The reflections danced in her hair like threads of gold. Luca stood behind her, hands in his pockets, watching, his eyes no longer cold. "The second kiss," she said softly, not turning around, "is often the confession people are too afraid to say out loud." He stepped closer, his voice low. "And to me, it's proof that I can trust again." Isabel turned, smiling, and beneath the glittering Manhattan skyline, their second kiss became more than a beginning. It was the gentlest verdict ever delivered to a man who once believed he had no heart. 3 weeks after their triumphant victory, the office of Harrington and Myers felt like it was buzzing under a strange new air. Loud, curious, and full of stares. No one talked about the international case anymore. They only talked about Isabel Blake and Luca Harrington, the firm's new power couple. Heard she slept with the boss to win that case. Talent? Please, she just seduced the right man. Each whisper was a needle to Isabel's chest. She tried to ignore it, burying herself in work. But every email, every half smirk in the hallway, every side glance made breathing harder. She knew Luca heard it too. He always heard everything. But he stayed silent. And that silence hurt more than the rumors themselves. Friday morning, as she stepped out of a conference room, a group of young associates snickered nearby. One of them said loudly enough for her to hear, "She's impressive, isn't she? Not only wins cases, but wins the boss's heart too." Isabel stopped. Slowly she turned, her gaze so cold that the man froze mid-grin. "If you meant I'm impressive, thank you. But if you meant to insult me, you might want to choose your words carefully before I file a defamation suit." No one said another word. But as she walked away, her chest tightened. She had believed that effort, intellect, and justice would protect her. But in this world, a woman's reputation could be shredded by nothing more than a kiss. That evening, she went to his office. The glass door was slightly ajar, warm amber light spilling into the hallway. Luca stood by the window, jacket off, hands in his pockets, the city lights glinting across the sharp bridge of his nose. He turned when he heard the door. "Isabel, we need to talk." She placed a white envelope on his desk. He looked down. A resignation letter. The air thickened instantly. "Is this a joke?" he asked, voice low. "No, it's the only thing I can do." "Because of a few rumors?" "Not a few, Luca." She lifted her chin, voice trembling but firm. "Because they erase everything I've worked for. I can't let my career be written off as the reward for being with you." He stepped closer, tone darkening. "I'll fix this. I'll make them stop." "How?" "Fire the entire office?" she said bitterly. "You think you can control everything, but you can't control how the world sees me." He clenched his jaw, eyes more wounded than angry. "Then I'll change that." "No," she whispered, shaking her head, eyes glistening. "That's the problem. You always try to change everything, and that's why they think I'm just another thing you've changed." Silence. The clock ticked on the wall. Slow, heavy, cruel. He looked at her, torn between anger, fear, and heartbreak. "Isabel, everything I've done, I did for you. And that's exactly why I don't feel like myself anymore. Her voice cracked. I don't want to be protected, Luca. I want to be respected. She looked away, took a deep breath. I used to think you didn't believe in love, but now I see you're afraid of it. You're so scared of losing control. And love, it can't survive inside a cage. He took a step toward her, but she stepped back. Don't, she said softly. If you touch me now, I won't have the strength to leave. They stood facing each other, two people who had survived sleepless nights, fierce trials, and countless storms, now defeated by whispers and the shadow of power. She picked up her bag and turned to go. Isabel, his voice broke behind her. I never wanted to control you. She stopped at the door, not looking back. No, you didn't. You just never learned another way to love. The door closed softly. The wind from the hallway drifted in, carrying the faint scent of mint that still lingered in his office. Lucas stared at the white envelope on his desk, his heart hollow. In that room, the city's sharpest lawyer, a man who could win any case, had just lost the only one he couldn't argue his way out of. The case is titled Love and the Pride of Isabel Blake. The next morning, there was a strange heaviness hanging over the Harrington and Myers building. At 7 a.m., an urgent email landed in every employee's inbox. Subject: Emergency all-staff meeting, 9 a.m., main conference hall. No one knew what was coming, but everyone shared the same suspicion. It had something to do with Isabel Blake. By 9 o'clock, the ground floor hall was packed. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the stage, where Luca Harrington walked up. No three-piece suit, no tie. Just a white shirt with rolled sleeves and a face shadowed by fatigue and unshaven stubble. Gone was the cold, untouchable man who ran billion-dollar deals. What stood there now was simply a man, one facing the judgment of his own conscience. He stood still for a few seconds, scanning the room, then spoke, voice low, steady, and raw. I've called this meeting because there's something that needs to be said, publicly. The murmurs quieted. This past week, there have been toxic rumors circulating through this firm about an employee I deeply respect. Those rumors didn't just insult her, they violated the very principles this place was built on. He paused, letting the silence stretch. And I allowed it to happen. That was my greatest mistake. The hall fell utterly silent. No CEO in the firm's history had ever admitted fault to the entire staff before. Luca clenched his hand around the podium, his voice deepening, each word heavy like a confession. Every day I speak of justice, yet I forgot that justice begins with how we treat one another. I let my power become a wall that made people afraid instead of protecting. The crowd lowered their gazes. A quiet wave of shame rippled through the room. Isabel Blake, he said clearly, not avoiding her name, is one of the most talented young attorneys I've ever met. The victory in our international case, that success was hers, not mine. Any rumor that diminishes her work is an insult not only to her profession, but to me personally. He lifted his eyes, steady and unwavering. Mark Reynolds, he said, turning toward a man in the middle row who froze in his seat, as of today, you'll be reassigned to our Anchorage, Alaska branch to oversee restructuring. I believe the climate there will give you time to reflect on the meaning of respect. A ripple of whispers spread across the room, but no one dared to breathe too loudly. Mark's face drained of color. Luca continued, his tone softer now, addressing the room, but perhaps speaking to himself most of all. We pride ourselves on being a prestigious law firm, where the law defines right from wrong. But today I've realized something. Law doesn't just live in documents. It lives in how we see each other and in the fairness we give to one another. I failed to uphold that fairness. He stopped for a moment, inhaled, his eyes glinting faintly with emotion. Therefore, I'll be stepping down as CEO for 1 month. Not because of a scandal, not for show, but because I need to relearn how to be a better person before I try to teach anyone else about justice. The hall went utterly still. No one spoke. No one clapped. The only sound was the faint, collective breath of quiet astonishment. Somewhere in the back, a few women lowered their heads, tears glinting in their eyes. Luca tightened his grip on the paper in his hand, His voice softened to a whisper, rough but achingly sincere. I used to believe love and emotion made people weak, but I was wrong. Indifference. That's what destroys us, and I won't let indifference kill anyone else under my watch. He looked up, eyes steady once more, and gave a slight nod. Thank you. The court is adjourned. As he stepped down from the stage, the entire hall rose, not out of obligation, but instinct. Then came the applause. Long, resonant, authentic. Not born of fear, but of feeling. At the very back, a solitary figure had been there all along. Isabel. No suit, no files. Just her, standing quietly, eyes shining with tears. She watched the man who once used law to hide his pain now place himself on trial, not before a judge, but before his own heart. And for the first time she understood. Luca Harrington had truly changed. He saw her. No words, no steps forward. Just a single silent look that said everything. Across the sea of people, they understood each other. Through one gaze, one truth. Not every ending is a goodbye. Sometimes it's the only way to begin again, with yourself. Late on a weekend afternoon, as sunlight brushed over the old rooftops of Brooklyn, Isabel heard a knock at the door. She opened it and froze. On her porch stood Luca Harrington. No suit, no leather briefcase, no phone glued to his hand. Just a gray sweater, dark jeans, and a bottle of cheap red wine she knew he'd never buy himself. The label crooked, the cap a twist off instead of cork. The sunlight fell slantwise across his face, through a mess of slightly tousled hair. He smiled, not the confident smile of a CEO, but something shy, hesitant, and heartbreakingly real. I heard that when you apologize, he said, voice rough, eyes meeting hers. You're supposed to bring wine, and maybe learn to knock instead of sending an email. Isabel laughed, half surprised, half moved. And here I thought you couldn't do anything without a schedule. I'm learning, he replied. Maybe you could let me practice for a month? A month, no contracts, no clauses, no signatures. Just a simple proposal to live like ordinary people. And so, in that little sunlit apartment, two people once known as courtroom legends began learning how to live again. In the mornings, they cooked together. Luca was hopeless. He cracked eggs that exploded in the pan, while Isabel laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. You review hundreds of contracts a day, she teased. Contracts don't smoke, he said flatly. Thank God for kitchen ventilation, then. She taught him how to pick vegetables at the farmer's market. He inspected them like legal evidence, sniffing, turning, comparing each tomato. You know, she said, normal people choose vegetables with their hearts, not with warranty terms. My heart doesn't come with a refund policy. No, but it does come with an exchange option, if misused. He looked up at her then, and for the first time smiled. Not guarded, not sarcastic, just human. At night, they walked through the neighborhood, eating ice cream on the sidewalk, listening to live music drifting from the corner cafe. Luca listened as she told him about the first case she ever lost, how she'd cried in a courthouse restroom and promised herself never to give up again. He didn't interrupt, just squeezed her hand. Isabel, he said softly, if there's one thing I've learned this month, it's that control saves no one, but trust does. She smiled through the ache in her chest. And I've learned that not everyone in a suit is terrifying. They both laughed. Into the music, the smell of pizza from the corner, the kind of quiet evening neither had ever believed they'd deserve. But what she remembered most was the rainy night. They had just come back from the grocery store, arms full of essentials Luca had cataloged into a 3-page household expense agreement. To, as he said, ensure financial transparency and accountability. Isabel unfolded the document and read aloud between gasps of laughter. Clause 2, Section B. Almond milk shall only be purchased upon depletion of cow's milk. Clause 3. Chocolate may not be purchased after 9 p.m. unless justified with reasonable cause. She looked up at him, laughing so hard her eyes watered. Are you allergic to chaos? No, he said, dead serious. I'm allergic to uncertainty. Poor you, she teased, because I am uncertain. Then she tore the contract in half, tossing the pieces into the air like confetti. He watched, helpless, and then burst into genuine laughter, loud and unrestrained, echoing through the small kitchen with the sound of rain outside. All right, he said, breathless from laughing. I surrender. No clauses, no contracts, just you. Good, she said, stepping closer, because I don't sign paperwork for love. The days that followed were ordinary in the most extraordinary way. They argued about who should wash the dishes, got mad when he bought the wrong toothpaste, and made up over pizza and long hugs in the kitchen. Isabel realized that Luca, the man who once tried to control the world with reason, was learning to love through surrender, and she, who had once feared heartbreak, was learning to trust without proof. One afternoon, as the sunset painted the balcony gold, she leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "Just 1 month, huh?" "Yeah," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But maybe I'll file for an extension." She laughed softly, and in that moment, in their small apartment, filled with warmth and laughter, they became living proof that even those most afraid of love can learn how to love again, if they find the right person to believe in. It was a quiet morning, the kind that felt like a fresh breath after a long storm. The Harrington and Myers building glowed again, but the light was different this time. Not the cold corporate gold of ambition, but a softer, gentler brightness, the kind that spoke of renewal. Luca Harrington walked through the lobby, greeting employees with a nod that carried something new, a sense of ease. He had returned after his month off to learn how to be a better man. No one clapped, no one whispered, but every glance that met him had changed, from wary to genuinely respectful. In his hand was not a briefcase, but a small bouquet of chrysanthemum blossoms. Simple, faintly fragrant, the kind of scent he knew could make a woman smile. She was upstairs in the small conference room beside the architectural model of a new project. Her brown hair was tied high, her eyes steady and bright. But today her smile held something deeper, peace and quiet strength. He knocked. His voice came low, calm. "Miss Blake, I heard you have a proposal to present." Isabel turned, caught off guard for a heartbeat. "I didn't think you'd come this early." "A reformed CEO always shows up on time," he said with a half smile. She placed a folder on the table. Her tone was steady, but emotion flickered in her eyes. "This is the Evelyn Foundation." He froze. The name, his mother's, was written in bold across the cover. His hand brushed the paper, his heart suddenly light. Isabel spoke gently, each word clear as a promise. "It's a free legal aid center for women who've suffered abuse, children without representation, and anyone without power. I want it to bear her name, Evelyn Harrington, because she believed love could heal and that justice should protect, not punish." The room fell silent. Sunlight streamed through the glass wall, glowing across the wooden table between them. Luca skimmed the proposal. The paragraphs were sharp and logical, yet in the margins, her handwriting softened the edges. Free counseling for victims. Law workshops for young girls. He looked up. The gray in his eyes had warmed, softened by something he hadn't felt in years. "Isabel," his voice cracked slightly, "you did all this for my mother?" "For your mother," she said softly, "and for you. Because I believe there's still a part of her heart inside you." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Something inside him, the fear, the pride, the grief, quietly dissolved, leaving behind only gratitude. Then she said it, the one thing he didn't expect. "I don't want to be your employee anymore." His brows lifted. "I want to be your equal, your partner. I don't need your protection, Luca. I want to build something with you." He blinked, half amused. "You're negotiating the terms already?" "Maybe," she smiled. "First clause, I have the right to say no. Second clause, that we start over. Not as boss and employee, but as two people who believe in the same thing." He exhaled, smiling for real this time, the rare, unguarded kind that reached his eyes. He uncapped his pen and signed the first page. Then he set it down and looked at her, voice steady, gentle. Then let's sign this contract of love and law. Isabel laughed through her tears. This one doesn't have an exit clause, counselor. I know, he said quietly, taking her hand. And for the first time in my life, I'm glad it doesn't. He drew her close, kissing her slowly and surely. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't born of tension or revenge. It was the calm conclusion of a lengthy trial, one they both won by admitting their own vulnerability. Light poured through the window, wrapping around them. On the table, the file marked "The Evelyn Foundation" lay open, and the bouquet of lavender chrysanthemums trembled softly in the breeze. 1 year later, a silver plaque reading "Evelyn Legal Center" hung above a modest street in Manhattan. Inside, Isabel ran the foundation, leading workshops, offering free aid, building hope. Luca had returned to his CEO chair, but every evening he stopped by the center, 2 coffees in hand, and that same look of pride he once reserved for courtroom victories. They were no longer lawyer and assistant, nor were they superior and subordinate. Now they were partners, in justice, in purpose, in love. In the lobby of the center hung a bronze engraving. Law protects, love restores, and beneath it, in smaller script, a promise sealed not by ink but by faith, signed by Isabel Blake and Luca Harrington, for love and justice.